Now let's go over to Rosiland, Jordan, in Washington, D.C. Now, the jury is still out, says a very senior government official. But, you know, there is this temporary deal. But what does that mean for the long term?
Well, what it means for the long term is that if they do not work out a deal on funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which of course covers ICE, and if that deal does not include tighter restrictions, I know that's an oxymoron, but some would say that the current rules are pretty loose, on how ICE agents operate, not wearing face masks, wearing body cam for recording their interactions with the public, not detaining people unless they have warrants, and not just randomly stopping people at their homes or on the street and arresting them and trying to deport them without those tighter restrictions. Senate Democrats have indicated that they will push for a fuller government shutdown involving the Department of Homeland Security and its subsidiary agencies. This is in response to the now 3 killings carried out by ICE agents since late December in Minneapolis during the so-called crackdown on illegal immigration. This is these 3 killings of Alex Preddy, of Renee Good, and of Keith Porter in late December have angered not just the residents of Minneapolis and St. Paul, but indeed have angered many people across the United States. And Democrats see an opportunity to try to rein in what they have long criticized as a rogue law enforcement agency by basically holding the funding for that agency and its parent agency, DHS, holding all of that hostage.
Now, Rosiland, how much of a political problem is this for Donald Trump? And by that, I mean, you know, what does this mean for him going forward? Because this was his, effectively, little baby, right? ICE in immigration was a platform that he fought on.
National poll numbers had been dropping in terms of what the public thought of the immigration crackdown. Democrats and independents were increasingly very critical of the crackdown. Republicans, by contrast, were very much in support. But after this past Saturday's killing of Alex Preddy, the Veterans Administration intensive care unit nurse, during an altercation with ICE agents, it really did set things off. The White House found itself being hit with an incredible amount of criticism and anger, including from some Republicans. And so between Saturday, when members of the Trump administration were saying that Alex Preddy essentially brought this on himself, to Monday morning, when the president announced that he had been in contact with both the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, and with Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, there was a decided turn of events to try to ratchet down the tensions by removing Greg Bovino, who was in charge of Border Patrol, who was overseeing these operations in Minneapolis, and sending instead the man known as the Border Czar, Tom Homan, to try to find a way to further narrow this operation in Minneapolis and perhaps withdraw some of the ICE agents and Border Patrol agents who have been involved in operations there for the past several weeks. This has been a decided ratcheting down of tensions, but it's not clear that these actions by the president or this short-term spending bill that has been agreed to tentatively by Senate Republicans and Democrats will do enough to basically make people feel better about the immigration crackdown.
Rosiland, Jordan, thank you very much. As you were actually speaking there, I just saw a social media post from Greg Bovino where he says, "I've got your back." So he's being very, very defiant right now. Thank you very much, Rosiland. I want to go to Jennifer Victor, a professor of political science at George Mason University, who joins us live from Fairfax in Virginia. One of the interesting things about US politics is you can get to a government shutdown, which is anathema for most people in the rest of the world. But it's not just the government shutdown. You threaten a government shutdown and the government naturally slows down as well, and that costs money. Just explain to us how this happens.
Yeah, it's an odd quirk of how this policy has developed, starting back with policy changes that were made in the 1970s, and then a critical memo that was written in the early 1980s that could frankly be reinterpreted. Somebody could reinterpret the rules and stop requiring that the government actually experience these shutdowns. But so far, as we are sitting here, and as it has been for the last number of decades, if there is no funding agreement, then the government is required to have these very expensive, very painful shutdowns that can be quite disruptive. And as we saw, the last one went on for a very long time, longest shutdown in history, and can be really disruptive for people's lives. I'm skeptical, although not entirely certain that it won't happen, even though we're seeing this positive breaking news right now about a potential deal being struck in the Senate. The Senate is still going to have to vote on this and pass it with the required number of votes, and then the House is going to have to vote on it because the House hasn't voted on this particular deal before, and the House is not scheduled to be back in Washington until Monday. We've had a week of really bad cold weather with lots of precipitation and ice and so forth this week. In Washington, D.C., we're scheduled to get a little bit more bad weather over the weekend. So whether or not both chambers can scramble 535 members from wherever they are to come to Washington and vote on this stuff tomorrow remains to be seen. If they can't, then we will kind of have a shutdown over the weekend because the current funding package expires midnight Friday.
When it comes to government shutdowns, it seems to me that it's always very political. One side doesn't want the other side to be spending money, and this is a tool to try and either slow it down, have time for negotiation, and then get to a deal. But have you ever seen it so highly politicized as this one? This is a federal agency that Democrats and some Republicans are saying is completely out of control. Is this unprecedented for you?
Well, I mean, we're living in the Trump 2 era in the United States. Everything is sort of unprecedented at this point. When we had the previous shutdown in the fall, you might recall the battle at that time was over healthcare funding. And at the end of the day, they did work out some of those, getting some of those healthcare provisions funded, but not all of them. And some people are now feeling the pain of that now that we're in the new year. And so that was more of a policy disagreement. I guess you could call the current disagreement over immigration enforcement also a policy disagreement, but you're absolutely right to call this shutdown situation, and really every shutdown situation, very much a political battle. What makes them so intense these days is we've got this really extreme polarization, which basically refers to sort of the distance or this chasm between the two political parties in the United States, such that whichever thing one or the other party, when there is a party that really wants something, that football, whatever it is, can become leverage for the other party to use and orchestrate these kind of painful events to try to use public political pressure to try to achieve these policy goals. It's an absolutely terrible way to run a government and to do policy, but that's kind of how things are operating at the moment.
You actually just answered my next question. I mean, is this a good idea? It's clear that you don't think it's a great idea, but it is the system that you've got. Now, how do you move on from this? So you get this 2-week shutdown. That's 2 weeks for avoiding a shutdown rather. That's 2 weeks for negotiations to take place. What are those negotiations going to be like if we're looking at kind of inside baseball here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I expect it's going to be fairly brutal, primarily for the Democrats, because the Democratic coalition on this, what we're seeing is a rapidly rising and very intense feeling, mostly coming from the political left, in opposition to aggressiveness and violence and so forth, all of these immigration tactics that we've seen coming out of Minneapolis. People are expecting it perhaps to start happening in Ohio and other places, and things that are not going reported that are trickling in. And this is really upsetting a lot of people. Your reporter in DC was just talking about how the polling numbers have really been dropping. I think Trump approval ratings are now at 39% on immigration issues. And so they're really Republicans are kind of losing the public battle over this issue. And we've seen some evidence of Trump and Republicans kind of reeling it back a bit. Democrats are angry, and they, at least the Democratic coalition, I don't know about the Democratic leadership, but the Democratic coalition, segments of it, are really angry and would like to see their leadership push hard to try to get something really changed, or to try to get some kind of use this moment to try to make things better for people so that they're not so scared in their communities. But whether or not they're actually able to do that remains to be seen. The public pressure and protests and so forth that are going on are certainly going to be playing a role. At the end of the day, it's fairly likely, I suspect, that the Democratic leadership will engage in some kind of compromise, because that's how politics works. You can only get things done at the end of the day if there's some kind of compromise, which the Democratic base will be unhappy about. That's probably where this is going.
Jennifer Victor, so much there to unpack, and thank you for helping us.
Thank you.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.